We all go off to work and we come into our garage and we go up to our TV, and then in the morning we come down to our garage and into our car and we go to, and so so on this street, for example, my husband is a stoop sitter, so he sits on the front step, and I come home from work or finish my work for the day, and I want to be on the back deck because I'm
You've done with people.
I'm done.
Yes, sure.
I want some peace and quiet, and he keeps saying, "Come on, come sit on the step with me." Can't be bothered. But within 20 minutes, there are 3 or 4 people sitting around, and pretty soon they're having a glass of wine, and somebody's staying for dinner because he hollers, "Hey neighbor, and how's it going?" and plays with all the kids. He doesn't work in this field, but just as somebody living on the street, he's a preeminent community builder.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. I'm in Victoria, BC with Michelle Colussi, who's been doing a lot of work for her community for a couple decades. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
Part of that is you've been working with the Canadian Centre for Community Renewal for a couple of decades on the economic part, and you're also a spearheader, I'm going to think of that, in the transition movement, bringing the worldwide and actually now transition movement here to Canada, both bringing trainings so that people can spread it to their community, and also co-founding Transition Victoria. So in a word, helping people transition in what way? Just a word, what's transition?
The fiercest element is transitioning away from our reliance on fossil fuels.
Yeah,
That's really the underbelly of transition. And of course, since 2008, there's been more and more urgency around transitioning our economic lives as well.
That's right, which kind of brings you right back to your home base,
Absolutely.
right? Of working with communities in their economies, right?
Yeah.
So we probably could talk for several hours, which would be really interesting because you've done a lot. But I'm curious to know, where's the fire for you right now? What's the exciting edge that you feel like you're working with in your community?
Oh my goodness! I think, and this changes as we move through various projects, and we all learn and adapt as we go. So my thinking evolves, of course, but at the moment, the edge for me is cooperation and collaboration. It seems to me that over and over again I come back to that. And those skills and values and beliefs about co-creating and collaborating really being at the heart of our ability to transition.
We need each other.
Yes, and we're not very good
We're in a
at needing each other.
Culture that has really, the consumer culture works very hard to kind of separate us all from each other, isolate us, and not teach skills for how do we compromise but keep our integrity, or keep playing together, or whatever. You're smiling. It's like,
well, one of the phrases I use is we need to be able to contend with each other and still go for beer at the end of the meeting.
I like that.
So how do we create spaces, organizational structures, decision-making processes? How do we come to it with certain values and certainly skills to allow us to get through those difficult moments, because they happen over and over again and thwart our efforts way more than they should.
So what are you finding that works? There's a lot of groups of all kinds, with all kinds of wonderful values that start up, energized, excited. How do you work to help sustain some of that energy, or go through, keep hanging in there together, either in a group, or are there particular projects, or what works?
Yeah, I don't know that we have answers to that, really. I think there are some clues, though. So the transition model actually is designed, to build on individual interests and energy, So if you're interested in worms as key to the food system in your community, then you can go off and develop worms and sell them and share them, get everybody to have little worm gardens, and that's your thing. And we want to support you in doing that thing. But we also know that to change a whole community, we can't just have the worm thing over here and the transportation thing over here and something with energy over here. We need to weave them together. So the model takes those diverse interests connected with working groups and puts them together around a common table as the core group that kind of comes together to say, what are we seeing in common across our different projects? What issues do we have in common that we need to work together on? What can we learn from each other? I have a problem. Oh, there's a solution over there in transportation. I never would have thought to look over there. So I think the structure is part of it. And in Canada, we're seeing some wonderful examples around, it's called the Constellation model, that was sort of piloted in Ontario and is now, there's a variety of trainings sort of across the country around using that model for collaborative efforts to tackle what some people call wicked problems in communities, the big conditioned poverty of children, as an example. Complex problems that no one sector or group is ever going to be able to tackle alone. So we have to come together.
What is constellation? I mean, this is something I've never heard of. What is this? Or what?
Well, the model is it's think of a web sort of, but at the core are representatives from a variety of organizations with different mandates, but all of them with some particular interest. Let's go back to the childhood poverty example in that issue. So they're all coming at it from a different angle. Some might work with families, some might work in education, some might work in housing, but they know they have to come together to really wrestle this one to the ground. So they do that, and then they go off like a constellation in the sky. And they all do their thing, different pieces of the work, but then they come together. So they have a common strategy, and then they take off and do their part of it and continue to come together and go out again.
I get this, if I understand right, they come together to sort of say, how do we tackle this tiger? Right, what part can this do, and I do, and you do, and so on, and together all the parts help move towards the next phase. Am I picturing that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right, and so as they go back and do what they can, come back and report success, results, problems, challenges, whatever. So it's a iterative, an evolving kind of.
Absolutely evolving, learning as they go. I mean, that's the other thing that we're not very good at, is kind of admitting failure, being open about failure, learning from failures so we can adapt and move on continually. And I think that at the organizational level, those collaborations are really important, but the other place we're tackling them is on the ground at a neighbor to neighbor.
Tell me about that. That sounds interesting.
So, and I guess I'll just say that one of the underpinnings for this work for me is the work of Joanna Macy, and she talks about three different kinds of actions that throughout history, and research is a big part of that. So what's working somewhere else? Like now I've shared this constellation model,
and now
how
you
can we
try
bring
it yourself, so that you know that there's constellation model, right?
So how do we bring that?
Yes.
But also values and beliefs. She talks about we have to shift values and beliefs, and we have to start building the alternatives.
Yes.
So the transition model is really all about practical building, but it also has that inner transition component, tackling values and beliefs. And in our work in Victoria, we've certainly seen that that's probably the biggest hurdle. And
shifting people's beliefs and values from this consumerist society, for example, or climbing up the tree, or the myth of progress and myth of growth.
All of
this,
all of it.
I'll get mine.
Yes.
And it's very American as well, of course.
And very Canadian, you know. We all go off to work and we come into our garage and we go up to our TV, and then in the morning we come down to our garage and into our car and we go to, and so so on this street, for example, my husband is a stoop sitter. So he sits on the front step. And I come home from work or finish my work for the day, and I want to be on the back deck because I'm
You've done with people.
I'm done.
Yes, sure.
I want some peace and quiet. And he keeps saying, come on, come sit on the step with me. Can't be bothered. But within 20 minutes, there are 3 or 4 people sitting around, and pretty soon they're having a glass of wine, and somebody's staying for dinner because he hollers, hey neighbor, and how's it going? And, you know, plays with all the kids. He doesn't work in this field, but just as somebody living on the street, he's a preeminent community builder.
What a beautiful example, and it doesn't require a degree.
No, absolutely.
To do that.
And so then,
Being neighborly.
you know, we host kind of gatherings among the neighbors. And I think then you have some relationships and some trust. So when I can't start my car and I have to take my son to school all the way across town, I can run
You're not
to a
afraid
neighbor.
to knock the door
I
of a
can do
neighbor.
this.
That's cool.
And
Yes.
say, oh, you know, oh, of course, no question that that's, and, you know, I have trouble with my apple tree. So Richard across the street is like the guru of apple trees. And the neighbor over here is a welder. And you discover that the widow down the street has all these pear trees in her backyard and is stressed about the fact that she can't process them all. And the queen of canning is over here. And then someone else down the road says, you know, I've always wanted to learn how to can. And pretty soon the 3 of them are getting together to tackle that issue. And they're all better off for it. They're all learning. And they're further enriching those relationships.
You know, you tell that story, and I get this, it touches me because I get this sense that if we all simply did that, somehow we would find our way to solving the really big, tackling the really big problems because we've built the base. I mean, that's very moving to me. You know, we can meet each other's needs and help each other and find our way through the thorny.
And we don't have to be, I mean, I'm not going to invite these people to spend Christmas with me.
Sure.
They're not, so there's a whole continuum of kinds of relationships, and that has to be okay as well. So Transition Victoria actually took the, what was it called? Transition Streets from the UK and adapted it for BC.
Which is, I'm not sure what is that?
It's a program that's street level that says on your street, get your neighbors together, and you spend 5 nights together. One night you talk about water. And there's a little thing about, you know, why conserving water is important and what are the resources in your area to help you do that. Same thing for food, for waste, for transportation. So they're learning together, but then they go back to their homes and they do stuff at the household level.
Yes.
And so they have the peer support built in. They're building relationships. They get a little bit of money to do a project together at the end. So here in Victoria, when we tested that, McCaskill Street, that was our pilot, they now have a freezer that is shared by several folks.
Wow,
and
wonderful.
they bought CSA seafood and they put it in the freezer. They have a street chicken coop that has 10 owners. It's a
my goodness, I love it, a co-op coop.
Because they can't all have space for chickens, so some of them grow food and another one has the chickens, but they all share in the cost and the benefits of that. They're tool sharing, so they sold redundant tools. There were 3 orchard ladders and 2 cement mixers, and they didn't need all that stuff. So they've built this way of supporting each other and learning from each other and sharing.
What a great story.
And I think, so we have now said, okay, our hypothesis was, what if in a given neighborhood you had 50 of those streets?
Yes.
Or 100?
Yes.
What's the tipping point? So you get that household level collaboration and sharing and skills, and then at what point does it really scale up and affect the whole neighborhood or a whole community to start to shift some of the attitudes and values and change behavior? So kind of from the ground
Beautiful.
up
Beautiful.
model. So
Yeah.
we're testing that at the moment in a project called Resilient Neighborhoods.
Resilient neighborhoods. Is there any kind of, is on a website?
Yeah,
Is there,
resilientneighborhoods.ca.
Oh, .ca
Yeah.
for Canada, yes. The picture you gave me is like your street and that street and 3 over and a few over here, and they
Exactly.
have something special. I mean, all the
Yeah.
examples you gave me.
And when you do that, I get goosebumps. I start to think, okay, now we're getting some scale here.
Yes,
Now we're
yes.
starting to have some impact.
Yes, yes.
So I think that's the juice for me, is that.
You know, okay, all right, gorgeous. When we come back in 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, I want to visit some of those neighborhoods and people to see how has this changed your life.
Yes.
And of course, I
And I wanna
expect
show
many
them.
more of them,
Yes.
right?
Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Because those folks are going to be there for each other if the power goes out, if the water stops, and so on. And to build that kind of resilience, and I see that you're doing it in a quiet way, shifting values. Oh yes, it's important to conserve the water. Oh yeah, let's recycle the waste or not use,
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that, you know, again, using my own street as an example, you gather people together. Well, we had a flood 2 years ago maybe, and the whole street at 4 a.m. was out bucketing and bailing, and it was pouring rain, and the creek at the end of the street was coming down into everybody's basement. And I think it was in the fall, so then around Christmas or something, we had a big party for everybody. And so you have those kinds of interactions and you come together, but you're not talking about peak oil or climate change. And pretty soon, though, because you have relationships, people start saying, geez, are you finding it's harder to kind of make ends meet?
Yes.
And people are saying, you know, I'm really worried.
And that opens the discussion.
Exactly.
Perfect.
And then you can start to sort of tackle some of those beliefs and values and how hard it is, and create a safe space.
Because you've already built some trust, you've already built relationships, and then you can get to the hard topics that
Yeah.
people can't.
That's right. But
Bring
if you
it
hit
in.
people over the head with that right at the beginning,
That's great.
it's quite often too scary.
Oh, Michelle,
Yeah.
I'm inspired. I am really
Yeah.
inspired what you're doing. Thank you. Is
Thank
there any
you.
little gem that we didn't cover in the, in this? Those are beautiful examples.
I guess just to say that as I sort of implied with talking about Joanna Macy and those all 3 types of behaviors, that we really do need to tackle the values and beliefs, but we also need to be building the alternatives. And we're not going to get through this unless we get community-owned finance mechanisms, community-owned land, tenure systems, structures like the constellation model, so we can organizationally tackle the infrastructure shifts we need to make. So it is at that personal household level, but also very much at...
Certainly, I can see that leveling the playing field, the economic, haves and have-nots. I mean, that's part of that towards a steady state where it's not as hierarchical as it is, certainly, and more enabling for people. Yeah.
So we need to do it all, and we can't all do it all. So we need all of us to be doing our part.
Thanks for following the fire in your belly, sort of on all those levels. Your household, your neighborhood, your your city, and beyond. That's exciting. So, thank you. Keep it up.
Thank you.
And would you share with us the song that you use in some of your trainings? Tell us that.
Okay. I actually learned this from Sophie Banks, who's one of the founders in Tautness and a transition trainer that brought that model to many of us around the world. So they taught us this song, and I use it quite often in workshops. So Belle Mama A, it has 3 words, and it goes like this.
What does it mean? What do those mean?
Beautiful Earth or Mother Earth.
Yes, okay, okay.
Belle Mama, eh. Belle Mama, eh. Belle Mama, Belle Mama, Belle Mama, Belle Mama, Belle Mama, Belle Mama, eh.
Belle Mama, eh. You know, this beautiful earth is very fortunate to have you on it.
Thank you.
Thank you for all you're doing. You're watching Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. My guest is Michelle Colussi from Victoria, and there are a lot of people caring for the Bella Mama, and I hope you're one, and that you meet your neighbors and get inspired to do the same. Join us next time.